It's all right for you to say that. It's very easy to just dismiss anything I say. So it's difficult, but what I've tried to do is to put my money where my mouth is, as much as I can.
Behind the golden gates of the palace, a quiet rebellion is taking shape. This isn't a fight for crowns or thrones. It's a battle over inheritance, legacy, and a mother's unshakable resolve. Queen Camilla, who has stood firm through storms of scandal and criticism, now faces the greatest test of her life, a confrontation with the very traditions that define the monarchy itself. How far will a mother go to secure her child's future in a world ruled by unbreakable royal codes? And what happens when that ambition threatens the order that has protected the crown for centuries? Camilla wants something the centuries-old order refuses to give, a secure future for her daughter, Laura. But standing in her way are two unyielding figures, Princess Anne, the guardian of royal duty, and Catherine, the calm yet powerful future queen whose influence echoes even in silence. In this collision between loyalty and legacy, even bloodlines begin to tremble. Stay with us as we reveal the hidden truths that could change the laws of royal inheritance forever. The royal fortune nobody talks about. When Queen Elizabeth II drew her final breath, the world mourned. But behind closed doors, another story was unfolding. Her eldest son didn't just inherit a crown, he inherited wealth that most people can't even imagine. The Duchy of Lancaster alone is worth more than £650 million. That's just one piece of the puzzle. There are properties scattered across the countryside, art collections that museums would kill for, and jewels that have been in the family for centuries. But here's the thing about royal inheritance. It's never simple. It's wrapped in mystery, locked behind sealed wills, and governed by rules that date back hundreds of years. When Elizabeth passed, everyone assumed things would follow the usual path.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. The palace has just issued this statement. It says the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon.
Charles gets the lion's share. William waits his turn. The system that's worked for generations keeps rolling forward. Nobody expected Camilla to throw a wrench into the works. The tension didn't start with shouting matches or dramatic confrontations. It started with a conversation on an autumn afternoon at Highgrove. Charles was doing what kings do, buried in paperwork that never seems to end. Camilla was there too, as she always is. She's part of the inner circle now, whether people like it or not. But something was different that day. Anyone who knows Camilla can tell when she's mulling something over. She keeps that poised exterior, but there's a shift in her eyes, a certain tension in her posture. She brought up Charles's personal estate, not the stuff tied to the crown, but his own assets, the properties he owns outright, the art he's collected, the treasures passed down through his side of the family. These carry weight, not just in money but in history. And then Camilla said something that probably made Charles's pen stop mid-signature. She wanted a portion of it to go to her daughter, Laura Lopes. Not to William, as tradition dictates. Not to Catherine, who everyone assumes will steward it for the next generation. To Laura. Now, Laura isn't some fame-hungry socialite. She's kept her distance from the spotlight, living a quieter life in the Cotswolds with her art dealings and her family. While her mother faced brutal scrutiny in the early days, Laura stayed grounded. She's been Camilla's anchor through it all, the steady presence when everything else felt chaotic. In Camilla's mind, doesn't that loyalty deserve recognition? Doesn't it deserve something tangible? On the surface, it sounds reasonable. A modern monarchy should embrace blended families, right? Charles and Camilla have built something together over decades, despite the rocky start. Why shouldn't her children benefit from that union? Camilla framed it as a gesture of unity, a way to weave her side of the family deeper into the royal fabric without causing a revolution. But scratch beneath that surface, and you'll find something more complicated. This wasn't just about fairness. It was about legacy, about making sure Laura's connection to royalty wasn't just symbolic. Charles listened. He always listens to Camilla, but he also knows that Catherine isn't just his daughter-in-law. She's the future of the monarchy in many ways. The public adores her. She's mastered the delicate art of being royal without seeming untouchable. If Charles redirected assets meant for her line to someone else, even someone as low-key as Laura, it would send shockwaves through the family. William would feel it. The grandchildren would feel it. And that sacred idea of continuity, the thing royals cling to when everything else is falling apart, would take a serious hit. So Camilla's suggestion just hung there in the air. Charles didn't reject it outright. He didn't embrace it either. It existed in that uncomfortable space between acknowledgement and action. But anyone who's spent time around Windsor knows that secrets don't stay secret for long. Those ancient walls have witnessed countless dramas, and they seem to have a way of sharing them. By evening, whispers were spreading. And inevitably, they reached Princess Anne. Anne steps in. If Charles is the careful thinker, Anne is the bulldozer. She doesn't waste time on pleasantries or political games. When Charles called her, he got straight to the point. He laid out Camilla's request, the emotional reasoning behind it, the practical nightmares it could create. He needed Anne's perspective, and he knew she'd give it to him unfiltered. Anne didn't disappoint. She launched into an assessment that covered every angle. First, the legal mess. Charles's will was drawn up years ago at Clarence House. It clearly distributes personal assets to direct heirs, with Catherine serving as the steward for the Wales branch. Changing that now would invite questions from Parliament. In an era when royal finances are already under a microscope, did Charles really want to hand critics more ammunition? Anne reminded him of the duchy controversies, how every pound is picked apart by journalists and politicians alike. Then there's the family angle. Laura might be wonderful, and by all accounts she is, but elevating her over Catherine risks creating a rift with William. He's already carrying the weight of being heir to the throne, dealing with expectations that would crush most people. If his father starts redirecting family wealth to his stepfamily, how is William supposed to feel? What message does that send to George, Charlotte, and Louis about their place in the hierarchy? Anne wasn't dismissing Camilla's intentions entirely. She understood the impulse, the desire to be fair in a system that's anything but. But understanding something doesn't mean agreeing with it. In Anne's worldview, the monarchy survives because it respects structure. You can't just rewrite the rules because they feel uncomfortable. Tradition exists for a reason, even when that reason seems outdated. Charles valued Anne's input because she's been his sounding board since childhood. When they were kids dodging protocol in the stables, Anne was the brave one, the one who pushed boundaries. Now, she's the one defending them, which is ironic if you think about it. But that's the thing about growing into royal roles. What matters isn't your personality, it's your understanding of duty. And Anne understands duty better than almost anyone. Her advice was clear. Stick to the plan. Let the assets flow where they're supposed to flow. Don't create unnecessary chaos in pursuit of fairness that the institution can't accommodate. It wasn't the answer Camilla wanted to hear, but it was the answer Charles needed. Do Camilla's children have any claim? Here's the reality that people outside the palace don't always grasp. Being the stepchild of a king doesn't automatically grant you anything. Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes, Camilla's children from her first marriage, have no legal claim to royal titles. They never did, and they never will, unless something extraordinary happens. Joe Little, who spent decades covering the royals for Majesty magazine, put it bluntly. Tom and Laura will remain exactly as they are. Their names won't change because their mother married a king. They won't get Scotland Yard protection officers following them around unless a specific threat emerges. They've lived their lives without that level of security, and that's not about to change. The interesting thing is, Neither Tom nor Laura seems particularly bothered by this. Tom's made a name for himself as a food writer and critic. He's got his own identity, separate from his mother's royal status.
Comes from Cooking and the Crown, royal recipes from Queen Victoria to King Charles III, a cookbook compiled by Tom Parker Bowles. Good morning.
Good morning.
And there really is everything in here, from how the king takes his martini.
Laura worked as an art curator before stepping back from public life. She values privacy, keeps a low profile, and seems content with that arrangement. They're not chasing titles or recognition. According to those who know them, they like being in the background. They understand their position in the family structure, and they're comfortable with it. That doesn't mean they're invisible. They showed up at Windsor Castle when Camilla was installed as a royal lady of the Order of the Garter. They attended the Platinum Jubilee celebrations. They were at the coronation, which naturally brought renewed media attention their way. But attention isn't the same as entitlement. The only way Tom or Laura would receive official titles is through nomination for good works, for contributions to society that merit recognition. So far, that hasn't happened. And given their preference for privacy, it's not clear they'd want it anyway. Their relationship with the actual royals is solid, though. Charles has known them for years, long before he married their mother. He's close with Tom and Laura, and he's fond of his step-grandchildren. William and Harry were guests at Laura's wedding. Her daughter Eliza was a bridesmaid at William and Catherine's wedding, one of those adorable moments that made headlines when Charles held her up on the Buckingham Palace balcony. So there's warmth there, genuine family connection. But connection doesn't translate to inheritance rights. The line of succession is rigid for a reason. It's not about who's likable or deserving. It's about maintaining clear rules that prevent disputes and confusion. The line that cannot be broken. When you look at the actual line of succession, you realize how little room there is for flexibility. William is first, obviously. He's been groomed for this role his entire life. After him comes Prince George, then Princess Charlotte, then Prince Louis. These aren't just names on a list. They represent the monarchy's future, the continuation of a 1,000-year-old institution. Even Prince Harry, who stepped away from royal duties and moved to California, ranks higher than his cousins in the succession. His children, Archie and Lilibet, have their own places in line, even though they're being raised an ocean away from Buckingham Palace. Then you've got Prince Andrew, despite all his controversies and scandals. His daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, are in line. Even their children have a place. The list goes on and on. By the time you get to the teens and 20s, you're talking about relatives most people have never heard of. But they all have a legitimate claim that supersedes anyone outside the direct bloodline. That's just how it works. For Charles to even consider bypassing this structure for Laura would be unprecedented. It would raise questions he's not prepared to answer. Why Laura and not Tom? Why Camilla's children and not his siblings' children? Once you start making exceptions, where do you stop? The whole system is built on predictability. Take that away and you're left with chaos. Anne understood this instinctively. She spent her entire life 16th in line, never getting closer to the throne, never particularly caring about it. Her value to the family isn't about succession. It's about work. She carries out hundreds of engagements every year, more than almost any other royal. She represents the monarchy with a no-nonsense efficiency that the public respects, even if they don't always warm to her personality. When Anne told Charles to stick with tradition, she wasn't being cold or unsympathetic. She was being pragmatic. The monarchy's survival depends on clarity, on everyone understanding their role and accepting it. Muddying those waters to satisfy personal feelings, however understandable, would set a dangerous precedent. Catherine's unshakable position. There's another layer to this story that can't be ignored. Catherine already has her own inheritance from Queen Elizabeth. When the late Queen's personal jewelry collection was distributed, Camilla naturally received first access. She selected pieces from the Greville legacy, tiaras and necklaces that once belonged to the Queen Mother. But Catherine wasn't left empty-handed. Far from it. She inherited about 10 pieces whose combined value sits around £81 million. The crown jewel, literally, is the Nizam of Hyderabad necklace. This stunning piece, created by Cartier in 1935 and given to Elizabeth as a wedding gift, features more than 50 large diamonds arranged in floral patterns. It's considered one of the most valuable items from the Queen's personal collection, and now it belongs to Catherine. Then there's the King George V festoon necklace, which Catherine wore in the official coronation photographs. 3 strands of diamonds, worth nearly £3 million, plus leaf-shaped earrings, a matching brooch, and several other pieces that most people couldn't afford, even if they saved for a lifetime. This inheritance wasn't symbolic. It was substantial, a clear statement about Catherine's place in the family hierarchy. She's not just William's wife. She's the future queen consort, the woman who will one day wear the crown that Elizabeth wore for 70 years. The jewelry is a down payment on that future, a tangible connection between past and present. So, when Camilla suggested redirecting some of Charles's personal estate to Laura, she was essentially asking to alter a path that's already been set in stone. Catherine's position isn't negotiable. It's not based on popularity or likability, though she has both in abundance. It's based on her marriage to the heir, her role as mother to the future king, and the institution's need for continuity. Anne knew this. Charles knew this. Even Camilla, deep down, probably knew this. But understanding the reality doesn't make it any easier to accept, especially when you're fighting for your own child's security. The decision that preserved everything. In the end, Charles made the only choice he could make. His properties will pass as they should, to William, and by extension to Catherine. The line of succession remains intact. The tradition that's governed royal inheritance for centuries continues undisturbed. Camilla's request, however heartfelt, was quietly set aside. This doesn't mean Charles doesn't care about Laura. By all accounts, he's been a supportive stepfather, present in her life, and invested in her happiness. But his role as king requires him to separate personal feelings from institutional responsibility. It's a burden that comes with the crown, one that Elizabeth carried with remarkable consistency throughout her reign. Anne's influence in this decision cannot be overstated. She provided Charles with the clarity he needed, the permission to prioritize duty over emotion. In a family where public perception matters enormously, having someone who will tell you the hard truth is invaluable. Anne has always been that person for Charles, and this situation proved why. Princess Anne remains the backbone of the royal family, not because she's next in line or because she seeks attention, but because she understands what's required. She carries out her duties with a dedication that puts others to shame. Last year alone, she completed 474 official engagements. She doesn't court the media, doesn't chase headlines, doesn't play favorites with charities based on their publicity value. She simply works. The British public has come to appreciate this about her. For years, she was seen as cold, too much like her father, Prince Philip, in her bluntness. But time has a way of changing perceptions. Now she's viewed as refreshingly straightforward, a royal who doesn't pretend to be something she's not. When she speaks, people listen, because they know she means what she says. Charles trusts Anne because she's never let him down. Not when they were children, not when he was navigating the Diana years, not when he was waiting decades to become king. She's been the constant presence, the reliable voice, the person who puts monarchy above everything else. So when the question of Camilla's daughter came up, Anne's answer was never really in doubt. Tradition wins, structure wins, the institution wins. It always does, or at least it has for 1,000 years. Whether it will continue to win in a rapidly changing world remains to be seen. But for now, the old rules still apply. Tom and Laura will live their lives as they have been, connected to royalty, but not consumed by it. Camilla will continue supporting them in ways that don't disrupt the succession. Catherine will one day inherit what tradition says belongs to her, and Charles will go on being king, balancing the impossible tension between family loyalty and royal duty. The battle that brewed inside Buckingham Palace ended not with drama, but with silence. Sometimes that's how the biggest decisions are made, not through grand gestures, but through quiet conversations between siblings who understand what's at stake. So there you have it, the story of how Camilla tried to secure her daughter's future and why Anne and Catherine's positions proved unshakable. It's a reminder that even in the 21st century, even with all our talk of modernizing the monarchy, some things remain stubbornly traditional. Whether that's good or bad depends on your perspective, but it's the reality of royal life, where personal desires often take a back seat to institutional survival. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more insider looks at the royal family. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think. Should Camilla's children have a claim to royal inheritance, or does tradition need to be protected at all costs? We'll see you in the next one.